Endorsements and criticisms. Trump has been endorsed by celebrities like Whoopi Goldberg and Barbara Walters. He has received criticism since his presidential campaign began. Transition to the presidency. Trump talks about his experience on the Oprah Winfrey Show. He explains that his life has been divided into two parts, before and after the presidential campaign. The Apprentice and Prime Time. Trump talks about his time on The Apprentice and its cancellation. He explains that NBC and other outlets tried to convince him to stay on the show. Polls and preparation. Trump mentions the polls that showed his high approval ratings. He talks about his projects and the construction of buildings. Inauguration. Trump shares his first impressions of the presidency. He describes the surreal nature of the situation and his first days in the White House. The White House. Trump describes the beauty of the White House and its presidential suite. He mentions Lincoln's bedroom and compares it to his own bedroom. The Gettysburg Address and melancholy. Discussion of the original version of the Gettysburg Address. Lincoln and his wife suffered from melancholy after the loss of their son Ted. Lincoln had a phobia of Robert E. Lee, who had won many battles in a row. Psychological advantage and generals. Lincoln was afraid of Robert E. Lee, who was a successful fighter. Lincoln could not defeat Robert E. Lee, which made him afraid. The generals who defeated ISIS highly valued Robert E. Lee for his strategic thinking. First experience of governance. The author was never a politician, but participated in debates. The first visit to the White House was surreal and sacred. Main tasks. Governing the country and survival. Appointing people in Washington. The president makes about 10 appointments, but the big appointments are made by others. The author had no experience in Washington and did not know the people there. Washington was a dangerous place, but the author was committed to making it a better place. Political involvement and the two-party system. The author was a major donor to the Democrats but later switched sides. The two-party system is difficult for independents. Most presidents have been politicians, not generals or businessmen. Recommendations and appointments. The author relied on recommendations from people he respected but did not know well. Many wanted positions in the administration, despite the difficulties of working with Trump. There are successful people in New York who would die for the opportunity to hold high office. The dangers of choosing non-politicians. Choosing non-politicians, such as businessmen, can be dangerous. Politicians are vetted in a way that businessmen are not. People outside of politics may be unvetted and unknown to the public. The problem with authority people often survive by being cautious. They may be smart, but they don't take risks or speak their minds. This can be a useful quality for survival in the system. Mistakes in choosing people. The author admits to having made mistakes in choosing people. He chose several people he shouldn't have, which led to failures. It is important to choose people who are right for the job, not just follow advice. The influence of neocons. Neocons can be useful, but they can also be dangerous. The example of John Bolton, who was useful, but had a reputation as a bad person. It is important to choose people who are right for the job and do not arouse suspicion. The dangers of the presidency. The presidency is one of the most dangerous jobs. The president is subject to assassination attempts and other threats. It is important to be prepared for such dangers and not underestimate them. Statistics and dangers. The presidency has a high risk to life and limb. An example of bull riders who are also exposed to high risks. The presidency requires preparedness for dangers and constant attention to your safety. Criticism of the media. The media often distorts the facts and equates Trump with Hitler. The Robert E. Lee and the South example. People who loved Trump were often stupid. Letter from the press secretary's assistant. The press secretary's assistant wrote a letter calling Trump the greatest president ever. She quit her job and started criticizing Trump, pressuring journalists to write negatively about Trump. The CBS scandal. Kamala Harris gave a response that was deleted and replaced with another. This was fraud, not editing. CBS made a mistake by publishing a preview. The problems with fact-checking. Fact-checking must be fair to all participants in the debate. The example of troops in war zones. Crime is on the rise, despite official statistics. The dangers of being a police officer. Police suffer the consequences of their actions. Many crimes go unreported due to moral standards. Police officers face dangerous situations and post-T. Traumatic stress. Police problems. Police officers often face violence and depression. They need to regain their self-esteem. It is important to fund the police and improve their training. Kamala Harris's political views. Kamala Harris is a strong supporter of the police. Her political views may hinder her presidential career. People are beginning to understand her views. Illegal immigrant problems. The idea of free sex changes for illegal immigrants. Kamala Harris has changed her views on this issue. She stole the idea of no-tip tax. Car manufacturing problems. China is building a car factory in Mexico. If the factory is built, there will be high tariffs. China has refused to build the factory because of tariff concerns. Tariff history. The United States was rich in the 1880s and 1890s because of tariffs. The income tax was introduced because of pressure from other countries. China also uses tariffs to protect its interests. Elon Musk and his achievements. Elon Musk created the Space Force and launched Starlink. Starlink provides high-speed internet. The US spends billions of dollars laying cables that are not used. Challenges with charging stations. 8 charging stations were built in the Midwest for $9 billion. 3 of them are not working, which is a waste. Numerous examples of inefficient use of resources. Tax cuts and an increase in the budget deficit. Tax cuts from 40% to 21% and further reductions to 15% for products made in the US. Success in attracting revenue to the country, especially from companies like Apple. Increased budget deficit due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Economy and regulation. Tax and tariff cuts have contributed to economic growth. Reducing regulations and regulation as key factors for success. The importance of reducing regulation for business. The impact of COVID-19 on the economy. The COVID-19 pandemic has stopped economic growth and killed businesses. The need to support businesses to prevent depression. The possibility of paying off debts if tax cuts continue. Environmental restrictions and their impact. Environmental restrictions as a powerful tool for stopping growth. Examples of how environmental consultants complicate the construction process. The influence of environmental consultants on decision-making and their financial interests. Problems and solutions in the environmental sphere. Environmental consultants use their powers to delay processes. Examples of how they complicate construction and obtaining permits. The need to mitigate environmental impacts and create green facilities. Meeting with Xi Jinping. Kerry goes to meet Xi Jinping, but he is not seen. China builds 58 coal-fired power plants a year. Garbage from China and other countries ends up in the Pacific Ocean and reaches the United States. Air and water problems. Dust from the Sahara and China affects the air in the United States. Chinese factories close before visitors, but that doesn't solve the problem. San Francisco and other cities have problems with homelessness and pollution. California's water problems. Los Angeles and Beverly Hills are rationing water. California's farmland is barren due to lack of water. Water from Canada is being diverted to the Pacific Ocean, causing drought. Lake Tachi. Lake Tachi was one of the largest freshwater lakes in California. In 1983, the lake was drained into the Pacific Ocean, causing drought. California's forests are dry and prone to wildfires. Wildfires and the environment. California's forests are dry, which leads to wildfires. Trees need to be moist to keep from burning. Clearing forests of dead wood and leaves could prevent fires. Electricity problems. California blackouts due to grid overload. People in Beverly Hills shut off their water due to shortages. Nuclear energy is seen as the cleanest and safest form of electricity. Nuclear energy and its risks. Older nuclear energy systems are more efficient, but raise political and environmental concerns. Fukushima and Chernobyl remain fresh in people's minds, making it difficult to develop nuclear energy. Modern technology allows energy to be generated without significant risks. Electric vehicle and battery problems. Electric vehicles often run on coal-fired power plants, which raises environmental concerns. California has areas with abundant battery raw materials, but their use is limited due to environmental concerns. It is important to use resources responsibly and carefully. Political and economic considerations. China could become a major producer of electric vehicles, which would impact the U.S. economy. The U.S. has significant oil and gas reserves, but their development is often blocked politically. Politics often hinders the development of new energy projects. Problems with windmills. Windmills kill birds and pollute the environment. They are inefficient and require frequent replacement, leading to abandoned sites. Windmill disposal also causes environmental problems. Impact on whales and the environment. Windmills can cause whales to beach themselves on shore due to vibration. This leads to pollution and environmental degradation. Nuclear technology also has its risks, but can be more efficient. Regulatory and construction issues. Overregulation can lead to significant costs and construction delays. France is building compact and clean nuclear power plants. An example of an effective approach. Nuclear energy can be dangerous, but has the potential to solve energy problems. Political and personal aspects. Transferring nuclear energy to other countries could lead to the creation of nuclear weapons. Biden has brain and health problems that affect his ability to govern. His behavior in debates and other situations raises questions about his ability to carry out his duties. Debates and opinion polls. Discussion of the need for debates. Doubts about the effectiveness of opinion polls. Personal experiences and criticism of polls. Foul play in polls. The theory that polls can be rigged. An example with a poll in Wisconsin, where Trump's rating was lowered by 17 points. The influence of such polls on voting. Denial of election results. Discussion of denial of election results. An example with J.D. Vance and his interview. The influence of elections on society and politics. Election fraud. The idea of election fraud as a taboo topic. Examples of strange events in the 2020 elections. The influence of rhetoric on the perception of elections. Pressure on politicians. Pressure on politicians and its influence on their behavior. An example with Kamala Harris and her cognitive tests. The influence of fame and pressure on politicians. Anderson Cooper interview. Anderson Cooper interview discussion. Criticism of her answers to questions. The influence of the press on perceptions of politicians. Russia and Ukraine. Russia would not have invaded Ukraine if Trump were president. Trump believes that oil prices at $48 a barrel would not have allowed Russia to wage war. Trump believes that Putin would not have entered into conflict out of respect for Biden. Mistakes in Afghanistan. Trump criticizes the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, believing it to be a mistake. He argues that the soldiers should have been the last to leave, not the first. Trump believes that the generals associated with Afghanistan should have been fired. Equipment and care. Trump talks about his experiences with children and equipment in Afghanistan. He criticizes the decision to leave equipment and vehicles in Afghanistan. Trump argues that the withdrawal should have been more thoughtful and careful. Bagram and the withdrawal. Trump believes Bagram should not have been abandoned because it is a strategically important base. He criticizes the decision to leave all equipment and vehicles behind. Trump argues that the withdrawal should have been more thorough and planned. Defeating ISIS. Trump talks about defeating ISIS in a matter of weeks. He emphasizes the importance of using the best technology and weapons. Trump describes his strategic decisions and interactions with the generals. Flying in the dark. Trump describes flying in the dark to avoid detection. He admires the pilots and their professionalism. Trump emphasizes the importance of safety and caution when flying. Meeting with the generals. Meeting with the generals and other military officers in the spotlight. Discussing plans to fight ISIS. The generals say they can do it in a couple of weeks. But it will take 5 years. Problems with the system. Orders from Washington prevent the military from acting on its own. Arrogant generals cannot resist orders. Examples of failed operations. Such as the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Rebuilding the military and nuclear system. Rebuilding the military and nuclear system. Understanding the power of nuclear weapons. Relations with North Korea and Kim Jong-un. Problems with North Korea. Meeting with Obama and discussing North Korea. Readiness for war with North Korea. Checking North Korea's nuclear stockpiles. Enemies within. Enemies within who want to destroy the country. Problems with migrants and criminals at the border. Examples of apartment block seizures in San Antonio and Aurora. Migrant strategy. Migrants are moving to other states. Problems in Springfield, Ohio. Mayor tries to be politically correct but can't handle the situation. Migrant delivery app. App used to deliver migrants. Migrants from Congo and other countries. Sarcastic joke about Dana White and his influence. Making a good deal. Making a good deal. Dana White is back and participating in the event. White is a dedicated and outstanding person. UFC involvement. White has many projects, including stand-up comedy and podcasts. He loves the UFC and the F. IGHTING, despite not being paid to appear. White helped the UFC in the beginning by providing the best places for fights. Influence on the UFC. White gave the UFC its first fights. Despite the difficulties. He has always supported the UFC, despite the criticism. White is a perfect fit to run the UFC. Boxing comparisons. Boxing is still a great sport. But the UFC is more popular. Saudi Arabia promotes boxing by offering big money for fights. In the UFC, fighters have more options for defense than in boxing. Weight cutting issues. Cutting weight in boxing leads to deaths. In the UFC, fighters can use the clinch and the ground for defense. The UFC weigh-ins are held the day before the fight so fighters can rehydrate. The greatest fighters in the UFC, John Jones and Georges St. Pierre, are considered the greatest fighters. Khabib Nurmagomedov is also an outstanding fighter. James Toney and Randy Couture are examples of great fighters. The fight and its aftermath. George choked James, but the fight was over quickly. George didn't fight boxers in MMA because he could have killed them. Anderson Silva was one of the greatest boxers ever, but Chris Weidman knocked him out. The impact of injuries on fighters. Chris Weidman's broken leg changed his career. Injuries can have a major impact on fighters, making them vulnerable. Fighters who are good at kicking can cause serious damage. Health and nutrition. Health and nutrition debates in the United States. Problems with pesticides and herbicides in food. Obesity and its impact on young people's health. The pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical companies aren't thrilled with criticism. Vaccines and their impact on health. Pharmaceutical advertising on television. The impact of advertising on purchases. Pharmaceutical advertising influences purchases. People often do not read the side effects of drugs. Advertising allows them to avoid responsibility for side effects. The impact of drugs and metabolic health. Drugs mitigate the effects of poor metabolism. Health problems could be avoided with proper nutrition and vitamins. Pharmaceuticals are not interested in improving people's health. Food and health problems. Regenerative agriculture is difficult to scale. Food deserts and unhealthy food are available in poor areas. Sending $175 billion to Ukraine could improve health in the United States. Genetics and health. Genetics play an important role in health. Golf helps you stay healthy through fresh air and physical activity. Golf requires concentration and helps clear your mind. Political career and golf. Golf helps you stay fit and focused. Political career requires a lot of time and effort. Golf remains fun even at the finish line. Political struggle and the press. Political struggle requires resilience and the ability to stand up to smart opponents. The press is often critical, but this does not prevent success. The internet provides people with information they cannot get elsewhere. Propaganda and trust. Propagandists take things out of context, which reduces their credibility. People no longer want to listen to propaganda because they feel insulted. The example of a son who knows about new people and trends. The influence of TikTok and young people. TikTok has had a huge impact on young people who reject wokeness. Young people are tired of criticism and moral standards imposed by society. Liberals advocate censorship and regulation of free speech. Political persecution. Political opponents are persecuted as in third world countries. The example of Hillary Clinton and Comey, who did not protect her properly. Comey wanted attention, which backfired. The 2020 rigged election. The 2020 election was the most rigged in history. Examples of irregularities such as lack of legislative approval and ballot rigging. The Hunter laptop example, which turned out to be a hoax. The impact of lies on the election. The Russia collusion lie and the Hunter laptop hoax changed the narrative. The constant mention of ties to Russia influenced people's minds. Lies and accusations of dictatorship were used to discredit opponents. The need for fair elections and a free press. The need for fair elections and open borders. The importance of a free and fair press. The example of Kamala Harris, who could have participated in the show but did not. Discussion of debates. The author believes that debates should be without time limits and without a crowd. He suggests holding a conversation between the candidates to avoid shouting and fighting. Debates should be structured so that candidates can freely discuss difficult ideas. Debate conditions. The author suggests installing cameras and turning off the microphone to avoid bias. He believes that a crowd of spectators should be present as it helps the better work with the audience. Debate with Joe Biden got high ratings, but no crowd. Primary L. Actions. Author did not participate in the primary debates because he believed he had a large lead. He did not want to waste time arguing with other candidates. Republican primaries ended without debates. Comedic moments. Author believes that debates should be fair and funny, like the Rosie O'Donnell debate. He recalls comedic moments such as timing and discussing LeBron James. Debates in front of a large audience help create a comedic atmosphere. Lies and policy changes. Author criticizes lies and policy changes of one of the candidates. He believes that the candidate has changed his views on many issues, which creates distrust. Author argues that the candidate is not trustworthy and should not be elected. Immigration and benefits. The author discusses the problems with immigration and benefits for immigrants. He believes that some politicians are trying to buy votes by providing benefits to immigrants. The author criticizes the spending on benefits for immigrants and believes that they are unjustified. The mayor and the investigation. The mayor said that he could not live like this, and an investigation was conducted. The author called the police and reported the charges. A group of people, despite their stupidity, are vicious. Election rigging in 2020. The author claims that he has evidence of election fraud in 2020. Judges do not want to hear the merits of the case. Potential vulnerabilities in the election are discussed, including mail-in ballots and hacking of voting machines. Paper ballots and voting machines. Elon Musk believes that without paper ballots, elections will not be fair. Paper ballots are cheaper and faster to use. Voting machines take a long time to count votes. Problems with mail-in ballots. Jimmy Carter and other experts say mail-in ballots should not be used. COVID-19 has made the mail-in ballot situation worse. Security guards were afraid to go outside because of the pandemic. Voter ID. Voter ID is essential to election integrity. Gavin Newsom signed a law banning voter ID requests. Democrats support voter ID, but politicians oppose it. Polarizing ideas. Politicians push ideas that the people don't want. Examples include open borders and transgender surgeries. Voter ID allows people to cheat in elections. Politics and taxes. Politicians often don't understand what the people want. Raising taxes on the rich won't solve the problem. The problem is that rich people might leave, causing unemployment. Illegal ballots. Thousands of illegal ballots were found. Judge rules that the ballots should be accepted. The system requires honesty from appellate judges. The JFK files. Discussion about opening the JFK files. Some people asked that the files not be opened. Plans to fully open the files after taking office. UFOs and aliens. Interviews with pilots who have seen UFOs. Pilots describe strange objects that are not comets or meteors. Question about the possibility of aliens. Military and government programs. Good relations with the military, but some people were not liked. Biden should fire military personnel involved in Afghanistan. The Middle East is changing rapidly, and prophets are predicting the end of the world. Nuclear weapons as a threat. Nuclear weapons pose the greatest threat in the modern world. Other weapons are important, but nuclear weapons remain the main threat. De-escalation with China and Russia. The possibility of de-escalation with China and Russia has been discussed. China could catch up with the United States within 5 years. Changing course and preventing war. The question of how to change the course leading to World War III. Russia remains a powerful military machine, which complicates the situation. Trump is confident that he could prevent war if he became president. Using tariffs to protect U.S. interests. Trump has used tariffs to protect American interests. The Biden administration is failing to do this due to incompetence. China and other countries do not respect Biden and his administration. Problems with electronics production. Trump criticizes foreign electronics production. Tariffs on chips are proposed to encourage their production in the U.S. Trump believes that high tariffs will force companies to build factories in the U.S. Conclusion and thanks. Trump thanks his interlocutor for the long conversation. He plans to give a speech and expresses gratitude for the opportunity to speak.